Welcome to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to being well-informed. Today, we're diving into, quite a fascinating topic. It's complex, potentially sensitive. We're looking at cultural preservation, identity, and societal change. And our way into this is through a really unique source, something called cultural erosion and the anarchist's lament.
Right, it's quite a title. And it gives us this firsthand account, doesn't it? Someone really grappling with what they see as their own heritage fading away.
Exactly. So our goal here really is to unpack what he's saying, his experiences, his arguments, and they cover a lot of ground,
Yeah.
personal background, political ideas, history, critiques of modern society.
Yeah, it's multifaceted. We're not necessarily endorsing anything here, but trying to understand the viewpoints, the concerns, what's underneath some pretty strong opinions he holds.
Definitely. It's about exploring these deeply felt worries about cultural shifts, about where he thinks things are heading. Okay, so let's unpack this right from the start. How does someone's own story, their personal history, shape how they see something huge, like cultural change?
Well, the material tells us he has a Swiss father, a German mother,
Yeah.
but interestingly, he grew up entirely in a French-speaking area.
Right. So French was his day-to-day language.
Exactly. And over, decades, his actual spoken German has faded quite a bit. He says his understanding is still strong, but the fluency isn't what it was.
And that specific experience, that's the core of it for him.
It seems to be, yeah. It's like his own experience with language becoming less familiar is, for him, a small-scale version of what he's worried about on a much bigger scale. It makes the whole abstract idea of cultural loss very concrete, very personal.
That makes sense. It anchors the whole argument in something real for him.
Right.
Now, this next part he discusses, it highlights a real tension. He talks about feeling, deeply frustrated.
Ah, yes, the frustration of being misunderstood.
Exactly. He wants to preserve his German heritage, right? But he feels that when he talks about it, especially if it touches on things like immigration or demographic changes, he gets labeled.
Labeled as racist, specifically. That's what he points out.
Yeah. And he contrasts this. He says, look, he wouldn't condemn anyone else for wanting to keep their own cultural roots alive.
So for him, it's personal. It's about identity memory. He sees it as apolitical, almost.
But he feels like you can't even talk about it these days without risking being shut down or completely misinterpreted. That's the core message here, isn't it?
It really is. And it brings up a really important question for discussion generally, I think. How do we talk about cultural identity? How do we respect different views without jumping to conclusions about someone's intent?
Yeah, it's tricky terrain. The source really highlights how difficult these conversations can be, especially when personal feelings about heritage get mixed up with broader, highly charged societal debates.
It's easy for nuance to get lost.
Definitely. Okay, so we have his personal experience, this frustration. What about his political identity? How does that fit in? He calls himself an anarchist.
Right. He explicitly says he rejects state authority, follows the non-aggression principle, basically, no initiating force or fraud.
And he's critical of states in general, big or small.
Yeah, his view is they inevitably grow, they restrict freedom. So how does this anarchist viewpoint connect to his cultural concerns?
Good question. How does that frame it all?
Well, it's interesting because his anarchism means he doesn't look to the state for solutions, right? He sees culture as something that should be organic, bubbling up from individuals, from communities, acting freely.
Not top-down programs.
Exactly. So when he talks about cultural erosion, it's less about blaming the government for failing to preserve culture and more about, maybe a perceived lack of individual effort, a failure of society to self-organize for preservation, perhaps.
So the state might be part of the problem, in his view, by maybe homogenizing things or interfering, but it's not the sole cause of the erosion he sees.
That seems to be the implication. His focus is more on the organic grassroots level and what he perceives as a decline there. It connects directly to his core political philosophy.
Okay, that makes sense. And this leads us straight into his main theory, what he calls cultural erosion. What does he actually mean by that? It's not just change, is it?
No, he seems to mean something more specific, like an active wearing away, a diminishing of the core elements, especially language, but also maybe intellectual depth, like soil erosion, but for culture.
And he lays out a few key parts to this argument in the material.
He does. He definitely presents a hypothesis about how these shifts happen. First, he looks at history.
Right, the historical parallels.
Yeah, he points to languages, whole civilizations even, that vanished because they weren't actively kept alive. He mentions Latin, ancient Greek, many Native American languages as examples.
And he thinks language loss is permanent.
Pretty much. His view seems to be that once a language stops being used daily, it's incredibly hard, maybe impossible, to bring it back to full vitality, like a living thing that needs daily breath.
Okay. What else? Demographics come into it, right?
Yes, he connects it to current trends. He argues that things like lower birth rates in parts of Europe combined with high levels of immigration are speeding up these cultural shifts he's concerned about.
And assimilation. How does that fit his model?
His argument there is about numbers, essentially. He suggests small minority groups tend to adopt the dominant culture over time. But, and this is his key point, if you have very large or very rapid influxes of people, the dynamic can reverse. The dominant culture itself might shift or even diminish. That's his perspective.
It's a complex argument he's building there.
It is, based on history, language theory, and demographic observations, from his point of view.
And it's not just about whether people speak the language, is it? There's another layer here about the content.
Ah, yes, the quality. He specifically laments what he sees as a lack of really engaging, high-quality intellectual content in German these days.
He mentions searching for it.
Yeah, and he says he basically found only one channel he thought was worthwhile, and kind of ironically, it hasn't been active for years.
Ouch. So he's pretty critical of the current German media landscape.
Very critical. He uses terms like propaganda-heavy, talks about shallow discourse. It suggests his concern isn't just, are people speaking German, but is German being used for deep thought, for meaningful exchange?
So the vitality of the culture itself, not just the language as a tool.
Exactly. It raises that question, can a culture really thrive if its intellectual core is perceived to be weakening?
Now, there's another element mentioned, maybe adding context to his overall independence, his perspective. His personal background seems quite difficult.
Yes, the source touches on that briefly. A challenging upbringing. He mentions morally flawed parents, abandonment, hardship.
And how does he connect that to his views?
He explicitly links it to his very strong stance on personal responsibility and, significantly, a rejection of what he calls inherited guilt.
Inherited guilt, meaning?
Meaning he doesn't believe people should feel guilty for, say, the actions of their ancestors or their group. His tough background seems to have forged this belief that individuals are ultimately responsible for themselves, for their own choices.
Which definitely reinforces that independent, maybe even contrarian streak we see in his other arguments. It's all interconnected.
Absolutely. It feels like a key part of understanding his whole outlook.
So, given all this, the personal language loss, the frustration, the theory of erosion, the anarchist lens, the focus on responsibility, what does he actually do?
Well, on a personal level, he talks about actively looking for German content, trying to maintain his own connection, his skills.
But he finds it difficult, limited options.
That's what he says, yeah. It feels limited to him. And it's not just him. He notes that friends he knows, people from other cultural backgrounds, they also seem to struggle to pass on their heritage languages to their kids.
So he sees his personal struggle reflected elsewhere.
It seems so.
Yeah.
It leads him to conclude that this isn't just his unique situation or just about German. He frames it as potentially part of a much bigger global trend.
A global cultural extinction trend, I think, is the phrase he uses.
Yes, that's his rather stark conclusion based on his observations. It really shows the individual effort involved in preservation and how, from his perspective, it's often fighting against these larger forces. His personal experience kind of scales up to this global concern.
Wow. Okay, we've certainly covered a lot of ground today, really trying to understand this perspective from the source material.
We have. It's a complex picture, this deep personal desire to hold on to cultural roots, set against these big societal shifts, demographic changes.
And as he highlights, the real difficulty in even discussing these things openly without facing immediate judgment or misinterpretation, that's a thread running through it all.
It really is. His lament, as the title suggests, it feels very personal, very deeply felt, stemming from his life, his philosophy. He definitely seems to feel like he's watching something fade that's hard to stop.
Which leaves us, and you listening, with a pretty big question to think about, doesn't it? How do you reconcile that connection we might feel to our own heritage, whatever it is, with the constant pressures of global change, evolving societies, shifting norms?
That's the core tension, isn't it? Heritage versus change, identity versus evolution.
Yeah, something to definitely ponder as we all navigate who we are and where we belong in this constantly changing world.
Welcome. I want to talk about the struggle I'm facing to preserve my German-speaking roots. And this is a hard subject because people will call me a racist simply because my mother is German. My father is Swiss and my mother is German. And because of that, people would call me a racist because I will talk about the struggles I faced to preserve my German roots. I've lived in a French-speaking region my entire life. And my friends, school and everything was in French. I have nobody to talk to in German. And because of that, it's hard to preserve my German roots, the culture, and that was given to me by my mother. People call me a racist just because I have a German mother and I want to preserve my roots. Now, of course, when I talk about culture, I will have to talk about immigration. And because of that, now I'm German. And also on top of that, I talk about immigration. I have to be in racist, 100% certain. And they will try to ban my channel and they will try to make sure that I never again talk to you. You must realize that I would never go to somebody's channel and try to get him banned and call him a racist because he is of his origins, because he is Chinese, Indian, Japanese, or African, and he talks about his culture. I would never hate him because of that. And people then will come and tell you, well, this is different. This is different because you have to feel guilt for what happened in the past. I don't accept the concept at all. I'm an anarchist. I try to be as far away as possible of any government on earth. Everything they did, according to me, are atrocities. All over the planet, everywhere, non-stop. I try to get away of that as far as possible by trying to be an anarchist and living after simple principles that everybody in his right mind would adhere to, like the non-aggression principle, never initiate violence, only defend, and so on. But it doesn't matter what you say, because no argument has any value. And when you want to talk about special stuff, about guilt and special stuff, then you must be able to talk about that. If we talk about it and I go straight to jail because there are laws, then what's the point? I mean, it's awesome for you because you don't like me since I have a German mother. It would be awesome. I would have no issues if my mother was Mexican. I would have no issues if my mother is African. I would have no issues whatsoever with any nation. But because my mother is German, I'm a racist. I lived in Africa for 2 months. I want to say it was awesome with black people. It is statism, like all over the planet. But I had no issues. If I had the money, I would visit China. I don't like communism, but I still would visit China. I'm sure that there are plenty of interesting stuff. The futuristic city, it would be amazing for me to visit it and see what it is. But I'm still a racist. I'm the most agreeable person. I'm the one who tolerates different people the most because I respect their sovereignty. And still, I'm the racist. I have to be banned and I have to be put in jail and anything possible that I never again can write any books or talk about anything because I'm a racist. According to them, I'm a racist just because my mother is German. You get the idea. Now I'll go over the subject and of course I will talk about immigration. And you see all the people who will hate me. But I still try to do it and I hope that I manage to do it in a way that for them it is hard to get me banned. Let's see how it goes and let's see what happens. Normally you get a couple of strikes. I guess they don't ban you definitely the first time. Maybe it will be just a strike. Who knows? And I try my best to make it as hard as possible for them. Still saying what I want to say. It's very hard. It never should be like this. I never should hate somebody just because he has a German mother. The real issue is not the nationality of my mother. That's not the issue. That's not what fortune did hard to me. Now it makes it hard to talk to you on YouTube, but that's not what was hard. What was hard for me is that my mother is a person of very low morality. She's stupid and cruel. She's somebody who's very hard to respect if you look at her life and what she did with her life. There's a word for that, and it starts with a B. And even because of that, I feel no guilt. I think nobody on earth should feel any guilt because he saw the light of day. I think you should only try to do the best you can. And that's what I'm doing. And of course, there will be a lot of people who keep hating you, but there's nothing you can do. And my father is even worse. He's an ex-Swiss banker and he turned bad. He started scamming people and so on. He's worse than Madoff because Madoff was bad, but he's even more cruel than Madoff. I talk about it in my book, my third book. There's nothing I can do about that. And if he doesn't like what I say, he will never watch. He doesn't care. He's just after people he can scam. He's just looking for the new victim he can find. and scam out of a couple of millions. That's all he does all day long. He will never watch my video and he will never care about me. He never did during his entire life. He never did anything for me during his entire life. He's much worse than what Madoff was from a moral perspective. And Madoff was bad. But that has nothing to do with me. I feel no guilt for that. It was extremely hard because as a child, I had to grow up with that and I wasn't stoic. And it's very hard to live in such an environment because they will abandon you. They abandoned me in the streets. I'm not going to talk about it in detail because it's a little hard to talk about it in detail and I don't have the right words in English on my tongue. You know what happens when your parents abandon you. You know that the state intervenes and that one or two things happen, but it's really bad. Either you get in an orphanage or something else, but it's not a funny situation. Nobody wants to live that. I try to talk about this difficult subject without getting banned so that my channel still exists and I still can upload stuff to it and I still can talk to you and I still can produce to you. Even if I have a German mother and I will talk about immigration. And because of that, there will be an immense amount of people who hate me beyond what is conceivable. But I still do my best and I try to make it hard for them to get me sanctioned. Let's go over my different points because that is just my introduction. My struggle to preserve my German-speaking roots. Culture vanishes over time. Through history, countless civilizations have disappeared. With a few decades of neglect, countless civilizations have disappeared, leaving only traces in ruin and memories. This process is ongoing and often inevitable. Loss of language is inevitable. Without regular use, language deteriorates until they disappear completely. Vocabulary and fluency fades within a few decades of neglect. We see this with Latin, once a living and universal language in Europe, now reduced to academic use in a handful of institutions. Ancient Greek, once the language of philosophers and scholars, survives only in textbooks. Native American languages such as Yuchi or Nes, once spoken by entire nations, now survive only in the speech of a few elderly people. Even Aramaic, the language of Jesus, persists only in a few isolated villages. All the languages I've talked about are linguistic ghosts. They are witness to a vanished world. Technology and invasion erase nations. Technology change and military conquest have erased nations' identities. These forces assimilate or destroy existing cultures. Imperial China absorbed countless neighboring people, erasing their distinct identity. Japan saw the disappearance of local cultures in favor of a centralized and unified state. That's not what I wanted to say. I want to say that the Japan medieval did disappear because of European conquest and European contact with Europeans. I think I changed it, but apparently I did not in my notes. Native American people saw their languages, religions, and social structures annihilate after the arrival of Christopher Columbus, replaced by European cultures. Civilizations such as the Aztec or the Incas were eradicated within a few decades, their temples destroyed, their rites forbidden, and all that remains are archaeological ruins and a few biased accounts. Is final. That culture never returns. I told you all that to show you that cultures have always disappeared and will disappear again. It is a natural phenomenon and it will happen again. And I want to preserve my German roots, but even for me, it's very hard. German's root eroding. Growing up in a French-speaking environment gradually eroded my fluency in German. The link to my heritage weakened with each passing year. Each year I do not talk German. I have nobody who talks to me in German and I don't listen to any German. My heritage disappears. I'm less fluent and I'm less capable of talking German. Immersion in a French-speaking environment. Daily life surrounded by French-speaking speakers leaves little room to practice German. Their linguistic dominance accelerates forgetting two valuable German resources. High-quality intellectual content in German is rare. In order to find someone who could speak to me in German, I began searching on YouTube in the hope of finding a worthwhile channel to subscribe to. The scarcity stems from the fact that few contemporary German authors or thinkers produce anything truly worth hearing. Most simply deliver statist rhetoric. Propaganda I have no interest in. If I wanted propaganda, there is an endless supply of newspapers, TV shows and books to feed me with it. What I seek is content that shapes my critical thinking, stimulates my reflections, and does not drown me in hollow speech that would dull my mind further. I don't want to dumb myself down when I listen to somebody think about stuff. I don't want to dumb myself down. Now, the best I could find was Ludwig von Mises' channel, and I found it. It's a channel with 175 videos offering economic critics, his point of view of the economics. However, it has been inactive for over 6 years. Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Tu veux être sur la caméra? Ok. Pas trop? C'est toi qui décides.
Un tout petit peu.
Ok,
Tu
ok.
fais une vidéo
Oui, je fais une vidéo.
pour faire quoi?
C'est pour mettre sur YouTube. Je suis en train de parler de choses qui m'intéressent. Je suis un auteur. Qu'est-ce que tu as envie de dire? Je sais pas si je vais te mettre, hein, mais si tu veux dire quelque chose, tu peux. Si tu veux dire quelque chose, tu
Je
peux.
veux pas dire.
Oui, rien dire?
Juste parler. Juste marcher.
Ok.
Hello. Tu parles en anglais juste derrière ta vidéo.
Oui, je parle en anglais. Oui, tout à fait. Pourquoi? Parce que il y a très peu de germanophones, il y a très peu de personnes qui parlent français. Il y a juste, tu sais, 2-3 personnes, mais ils sont pas beaucoup. Et si tu veux avoir des gens qui t'écoutent, bah, le français, c'est pas la meilleure idée.
En fait, Théo, l'anglais, c'est la langue principale. Et pourquoi t'as appris plein de choses?
Hélas, c'est la langue principale. Moi, je trouve que c'est triste et c'est un peu de ce que je parle. Je parle du fait que les cultures sont en train de s'effacer. Je suppose que vous êtes tous suisses?
Ouais.
Ouais, moi aussi, je suis suisse. Mais c'est rare, si tu regardes autour de toi, si tu regardes à l'école, les Suisses, il n'y en a plus tant que ça.
Mhm.
Parce qu'en général, il y a moins d'enfants.
Pourquoi t'es en habit de sport?
Pourquoi je suis en habit sport? Parce que je suis en train de faire un exercice aussi. Je suis en train de faire un exercice.
Ouais, tu marres.
Ça, c'est soit quand tu vas courir, ça rend la course plus facile. Tu cours un peu plus vite.
Ah, ça pour relever un peu.
Oui, regarde. Là, c'est de la résistance, donc c'est plus difficile de marcher. Mais je peux mettre le mode assistance. Et après, ça va me pousser. Je vais courir plus vite. Donc, je l'utilise soit pour faire du sport, soit comme maintenant pour faire un exercice. Parce qu'en même temps que je travaille, tu vois, que je fais cette vidéo, je peux
Faire un bon exercice
faire un exercice sportif.
de marcher.
Exact, plus dur.
Mais t'es youtubeur?
Oui, je suis un youtubeur. Entre autres.
D'accord.
C'est pas la seule chose que je fais. Tu sais, il y a des gens qui font plusieurs choses dans la vie. Moi, j'écris des livres de philosophie. Et puis, je suis un analyste financier.
C'est quoi là sur tes lunettes?
Sur mes lunettes?
Ouais.
Vous êtes vraiment très curieux. Mes lunettes, c'est des lunettes intelligentes. Donc, tu sais ce que c'est un téléphone portable.
Ouais.
Ok, il y a des messages sur des téléphones portables, etc.
Ah, il y a des sacs dedans.
Et moi, j'ai des messages qui apparaissent là-dessus.
Wesh!
Ouais.
C'est comme dans un film.
C'est comme dans un film. Mais vous allez avoir tout ça. Tu vois, toi, t'es jeune. Toute cette technologie dont je parle, elle sera géniale. Elle sera 10 fois mieux.
C'est comme si tu pouvais tricher à l'école.
Tu peux tricher, ouais. Mais c'est pas fait pour tricher.
Mais on peut voir des trucs verts. Mais ça
Oui,
s'écrit devant tes yeux?
Oui, c'est-à-dire je vois du texte.
Et comment?
Comme dans un livre.
Et c'est une personne qui te met?
Non, c'est juste une application. C'est juste une application.
C'est très puissant. Là, ton coup, tu t'écris ça et tout. Après, ça revient sur tes yeux. Là, sur les lunettes.
Tu mets le texte que tu veux et puis tu le fais apparaître. Et puis quand quelqu'un envoie un message, au lieu de sortir ton téléphone, tu vois direct dans les lunettes le message.
Bah ouais. C'est comme les montres. Des fois, tu peux.
Exact, c'est comme les montres intelligentes. Ça, c'est une vieille, mais j'en ai d'autres.
Mhm.
Bon, je vous laisse, je recommence mon travail.
Ouais.
Bonne soirée, les gars.
Au revoir.
Au revoir. Those were some kids, and I had a French chat. Maybe I leave it in. They were very interested in what I was doing. Not everybody is violent. People normally are like that. They are normal, and you should be scared of them. It's very nice when you find normal people. I enjoy talking to them a couple of words and explaining them what I do. And I find it great that they're interested, that they want to learn new stuff. If propaganda does not destroy them, they are like geniuses. There's so much stuff that interests them, and they are so happy to live, and they want to learn new stuff. Unfortunately, our world and statism dulls them down and makes out of them robo zombies, NPCs. But normally they're great people. I think there's still one following me. Ludwig von Mises' channel found a channel with 155 videos offering economic critics. However, it has been inactive for over 6 years. Mises critiques the state, but accepts it. While recognizing the danger of the state, Mises still considers it necessary. His reasoning stops short of complete rejection. Mises criticizes the state, and he does that very well. But he never will reject it totally. He can't be intellectually honest and go the last step. The state, an ever-expanding monster. Governments constantly grow, creating useless institutions. Each expansion further erodes individual freedoms. Mises understands this mechanism, but remains trapped in the illusion that a small state could remain small. Even if such an ideal state comes into being, it would inevitably swell. The thing is, even if Mises gets his state, which he's dreaming of, which would be much better than the states we have nowadays, but even if he gets it, it would swell, it would grow, adding mandates, multiplying taxes, passing new laws, extending its power. History shows that no state ever stays within its limit. Mises spends his life complaining about the state's expansion without ever considering its outright abolition, remaining within a framework where the state is unavoidable. It's an intellectual dead end. You cannot argue with them because they will always just complain about minor details. And they always think we didn't elect the right person, or this law is not nice, or that is not nice. And they're always bigger on small details. But they don't realize that things don't really improve, that you always have the same, and that it's not getting better while they just complain. That there are a lot of reasons why it's much worse. There were much more freedoms in the 17th. There were much more freedoms at the end of World War II than you have now. You can keep complaining, you can keep indicating the right direction. A smaller state is better. Mises fear losing his property. Now this is the thing with Mises. I cannot go there, there's loud music. I said that Mises is remaining in a framework where the state is unavoidable, an intellectual dead end. He will keep bickering, he will keep criticizing the state. He will tell you how bad it is and why it is so bad, and all the new stuff the state has put in that must be all rejected. He will do that without ever stopping. But it's a dead end because he will never accept the possibility that you just have to abolish it, that it cannot be saved. The state he dreams about, the small state, will never stay small. It will always grow. And he talks about that in a very precise and accurate manner. But he doesn't understand that the entity will always grow by itself. Whatever you do, it will never stay at the state you want. If you look at our past, we have less freedoms now that we had at the end of World War. I had to put the light on because the sun just disappeared 10 minutes ago. And you won't see me anymore without putting the light on my smartphone. So we had much more liberties in the 17th or at the end of World War II. You can keep arguing. You can keep telling the slave master that you're not happy and that you don't like war, that you don't like ever increasing taxes, that you don't like tariffs and all the other crap that happens all day long. You can keep complaining about that as long as you want. But it will not disappear. You will never go back to the 70s. You will never go back to the end of World War II and get back the liberties we had then and we don't have anymore. And get rid of the freedom-killing laws. That will never happen. You can try to beg and argue with the slave master and hope that one day he will behave more according to your wishes. but it will never change. It will always be statism, and it will always go. The more it goes, and everybody wants just to go. The more it goes, the worse it is. Mises is an exception. That's why we talk about him. But he's an exception. He's one of the few who got it right up to a certain degree. His issue is the following. Mises fears losing his property. His defense of the state stems from a fear of losing his home. He cannot imagine a private system replacing the state protection. He can only imagine protection from the state. He cannot imagine that a private entity could offer him the same protection. Alternatives to state protection are ignored by him. Private contracts and insurance could protect property more fairly. Mises refuses to consider these options. At least he never talks about it. He would never go that far. That would scare him a lot. And I talk about Mises because he was the one channel I found who is German. Anarchy is not the absence of harm. It is just less harm. Even without a state, crimes and tragedy would still occur. However, the scale would be far smaller. State violence exceeds the harm of anarchy. The number of deaths caused by state wars and oppression far surpasses anything that could occur under anarchy. That's the thing. Of course, anarchy, you still can get assassinated. You still can die a violent death. But the difference is in the numbers. The difference is staggering. For every 10,000 or 100,000 deaths caused by the state would cause one. The difference is huge. You would get much less people dying with anarchy than statism. Statism is the biggest killing machine that was ever invented in human history. I think that everybody wants to come on and wants to say hello today. Normally it's not like this, but since it's Friday and it's a heat wave, well, people are outside. I was talking about the difference in numbers, and I tried to explain to you that for one guy dying, there are 10,000 or 100,000 dying with statism. Yes, it's not the absence of all harm. It is just less harm. It is less bad. The rare deaths on the anarchy would result from acts of self-defense in exceptional cases. There will be only very few exceptional and marginal cases of self-defense where people will die. But that's not the normal outcome. It is a thing that happens only infrequently. Now let's talk about the decline of intellectual life in German. Modern German intellectual discourse offer little value. Once Germany was thriving with music, architecture, and philosophy. Today, it offers only unbearable mediocrity. The contract is that one feels nausea. That's a nice word for saying how disgusted you are with what it has to offer nowadays. You see there, what was once grand has been replaced by culture and intellectual emptiness. Instead of having great, beautiful stuff, you have cultural and intellectual emptiness. Migrants and low birth rates erode cultures. European culture weakens as native population shrinks and replaced by migrants who retain their own customs. This affects everything: language, clothing, style, religious practices, celebrations, shared reference. You must understand that all those people have their culture and they don't want to replace their culture with any other culture. They didn't come here because they want to get a new culture, a new language, a new way of life, or a new way of thinking. They wouldn't want to come to my school or any other school. They're here because from an economical stature, it is better for them to be here. Their income increases by 10, by 100, by 1,000, just because they arrive in these developed countries. A striking example. For the first time in Switzerland, I saw a group of 5 Muslims praying in public, in a park. I've never seen that. But the last time I went for a run, I saw them. It's the first time I saw them praying in public. I'm not offended by that. I don't mind that they do it. But it is a very striking image. It wasn't like that until now. And now it starts. And it's only the beginning. And I don't know if it's legal. And I don't care if it's legal. I just want to point out that it's one of the things you will see. Today I'm lucky. The 5 kids, I think, were all Swiss. But that's a huge exception. That's not the rule. Most of the kids I see aren't Swiss. This is just one sign among thousands. Everywhere, the visual, cultural, and linguistic space is occupied by other traditions. The transformation is rapid, visible, and reversible. You cannot go back. Once they are here, and they will not leave. And there's nobody who wants to put them out. They're here, and they do everything they can to bring more in. It is irreversible. I try to say it like in English, irreversible, because you say it a little different than in French. Even the word is exactly the same. When Latin disappeared, it was irreversible. You could not go back. When the Greeks' traditions were extinguished during the Middle Ages, it was irreversible. Once there are no more people like me walking around, it is irreversible. And once I lost my German roots, it is irreversible. I can learn them again, maybe, if I live long enough, but I won't. The thing is, you lose your tradition, you lose your culture over time. And that transformation is rapid, visible, and irreversible. That's the thing people don't get. And they don't care about it. Because actually they do not care about their tradition. Now, do I care about my tradition and about the German-speaking intellectuals? I don't. Because the only thing I could find is Mises. And Mises is intellectual dishonest. Because he doesn't go far enough. I studied economics at university. And it's even worse, because they don't even talk about Mises. They only talk 100% about Keynes. And that's even worse than Mises. But the only guy I find lived a century ago and did his work a century ago. Do you think that's a huge cultural thing to give me? But I know that he did more. And I know that it's capable of doing more. But I don't think that very low natality and a lot of immigration will provide a lot of genius to us. It has nothing to do with racism. I don't say that they're not capable of doing interesting stuff. It is just that it is different. It is a different culture. They won't produce the same. They won't write a symphony like Mozart or Beethoven. They will not do that. They're not interested in that. I told you, they don't want to come in my school and become Stoic. They have their tradition. They have their values. They have their morality. They have their way of living. And they like that. That's all they have ever known. And that's the only thing that will ever interest them. It's nothing bad. It's just different. And if you cannot realize that it's different, if you cannot realize that just between us already, between Stoic people and Epicureans, the difference is huge. We teach the opposite. Still, we are the most respectable. And we came out of the same origins since it started in Greece. Now you take people coming from all over the planet with very different beliefs and very different origins. And they will keep their beliefs and their origins as much as they can. It's a question of numbers. If you bring one barbarian into the Roman Empire, he will assimilate to the Roman lifestyle. And he will become a Roman in that case, because they will consider him assimilated. Only if you had a life of a Roman, if you lived the same way as a Roman would, if you had the same practices, if you talked the same languages, they would consider you Roman, because you would assimilate. Yes, if there's one guy who goes into a group of 10 millions, he will assimilate. But if there are 10 millions going into a group of 10,000, the 10,000 will assimilate to the 10 millions. It always happened in history. It's a question of numbers. It's a number game. And if you think that because I'm talking about this is racism, it is math. It has nothing to do else than math. People will assimilate to the dominant culture if it is dominant and it is overwhelming. If I go to an Arabic country where Christianity or anything else is banned except Islam, I will assimilate to Islam or I will disappear. And that happens if I'm the only one who goes. But if it's the other way around, yeah, well, then they will assimilate. But here, the numbers are huge, and I don't believe there's any assimilation unless you really want it. You will become Stoic. Anyone, it doesn't matter from where you are, you will become Stoic. You will learn how to speak French if you want it, but only if you want it. People who come here, they never say, they ask them what they want. They would never say, I want to become Stoic or I want to learn French. That's not why they came. That's not their goal. Their goal is to improve from an economical standpoint, is to get 10x or 100x or 1000. just by arriving, because the trajectory is very easy. It's very easy for me to go to Africa since I went there and I spent 2 months there. It's very easy. You just take a plane and a couple of hours later you're there. Now, if I do that and suddenly my income increases by 10 or by 100 or by 1,000, yeah, that's a huge deal. That's amazing. But that doesn't mean that I want to become an African. That doesn't mean I want to live and adopt their way of living. Even if I'm very tolerant and I don't mind any other culture, I'm one of the most tolerant people you will find. Go with me to China. I guarantee you, all day you would complain about communism and their way of living. All day. The smallest thing you won't like. Because you are made to live in a certain system, in a certain developed country, with a certain culture, certain way of life. And if you go there, it will be very hard for you to adapt or to see anything good in it. Without wanting to become a communist, I would still appreciate everything that can be appreciated about that culture. But I'm an exception. And you call me a racist just because I talk about that today. I normally never talk about this. The only reason why I talk about this is because I'm losing my German roots. I'm losing an heritage that was given to me. You can say by God or by fortune. It was given to me and I'm losing it because I never talk German. And I want to put a stop to that. I want to maintain it. I want to be able that when I meet a German guy that I have a little vocabulary. I understand 100% of what everything does. Even the Mises Institute, when they talk about economics, close to 100%. Maybe sometimes one word or two are a little difficult because it's the first time I've heard them, but I very easily get used to them, very easily understand them, and it's all right. But it's very hard for me to have a fluent conversation because I haven't said a German word in decades and over decades. And that kills my vocabulary. That kills my ability to talk German. And that's the only reason why I talk about immigration and culture, because I want to preserve the culture that was given to me. The culture that makes you think that I'm a racist just because my mother is German, which to me is scandalous. It's scandalous that I live in such a world where you discriminate against people because of their origins, and you discriminate against me just because I have a German mother. And then you try to get my channel banned and all that. We talked about it in the introduction. There are a few interesting German channels. After hours of searching, only 1 or 2 channels were worth the effort. So I spent hours searching with AI. I asked him to give me the best he could. I explained to him my interest and so on. And I said, you can even be creative and find me something I don't think about, but has some meaning. It was very little what he came up with. He came up with a couple of channels, but they were already translated in English, and I'm already subscribed to the English version. Sometimes they are double audios. People make one version in French and another version or in Portuguese and another version in English. And YouTube decides spontaneously. You cannot tell him which he gives you. If he thinks you speak English, and for me he thinks he speaks English, because nearly everything I watch on YouTube is in English, because that's the only people who produce stuff. But even if it's in German, they give you the English audio, because he thinks that I'm English. There was very few things worthwhile. After hours of searching, only 1 or 2 channels were worth the effort. Most are uninteresting, mind-numbing. Most of the channels are saturated with propaganda, and they are endlessly repeating the same insignificant topics you see on TV. It is a complete waste of time. The intellectual equivalent of watching trash talk shows all day long. I think that most cultures on this planet are heading for extinction. And the same thing that happened with the Latin language will happen to us. To all those small languages who don't produce anything intellectual. If I want to keep my German up, I must find somebody that I think worthwhile talking to, that I think worthwhile listening to. And I tried very hard. It is really difficult. I think most cultures are heading towards extinction. Declining birth rates, globalization, and mass migrations are pushing many cultures toward disappearance. That will happen quite fast. It will happen in a couple of generations. It didn't take long for Indonesia to become the biggest Muslim country on the world. It happened very fast. And the culture that they had before that disappeared. I think they might have conserved the language or a couple of temples, but most of it did disappear. Active vocabulary quickly declines. Comprehension remains, but fluency collapses. I'm talking about my personal experience and how I've realized that my fluency did collapse. My comprehension stayed intact up to a certain degree. Of course, if I would have listened to a German speaker, if I would have gone to a German university and had German friends, then my ability of talking German would have been higher. The issue is not my ability to understand. The issue is my ability to be fluent in it. Just as it is harder for me to speak English. But if I compare, the easier it is for me to speak French. English is quite easy. It's a little harder than French. I would never write a Stoic book in English. I would always write it in French and translate it into English. But it is easier for me to speak English than to speak German, because German is even harder. I even have a smaller vocabulary. Even though my understanding is very high, my vocabulary is smaller. Comprehension remains, but fluency collapses. I see this in myself. My German roots, passed down from my mother, are slowly fading. And that's why I make this video, this intervention. The topic is to talk about my struggle to maintain my German roots, to keep them intact. The loss is not only external, it is deeply personal. The loss is not just that a culture disappears because of the issue of assimilation we talked about, because that issue exists, but it is never what you think it is. It's a number game. And the numbers are not in our favor, because the only woman I lived with 5 years asked her if she wanted a child. She explained to me that she doesn't even want one child, that she's not interested. And most people are like this. Very hard to make them have 1 or 2 child. Now, yesterday I spent time with a friend. She comes out of a family of 5 children. I come of a family of 4 kids. And nowadays it is very hard to find a woman who wants just 1 kid. The numbers are not in our favor. That will not improve. Everything you see, every analysis shows you the opposite. It shows you that it gets worse. I will publish a video soon about how they try to pay people to have kids. And they still don't want any kids. They tried very hard, the governments, but it doesn't work. And I already published in the past. It's a never-ending thing. Everybody knows it. I'm not saying anything revolutionary. I just talk about my personal experience with a huge part of my culture disappearing under my own eyes. Now, it wasn't my priority to maintain it, and I didn't have the financial wealth. If I had 200 millions, I would have maids, and a couple of them will be German, just because I want them to speak German. I don't know what I would do. But if I had more financial possibilities, I would try to find a solution to maintain my German roots. The only thing I can do, and it's not so bad, is YouTube. But it was a very difficult struggle. I did spend like 5 hours trying to find, not 5 hours, 3 hours, and there was not much coming up, as I told you. I see it in myself. My German roots passed down from my mother are slowly fading, and I'll try to maintain them until my death. Even if I have no kids, I cannot transmit them to my kids. Now, if I had kids, I would want to transmit them. And that would be a very difficult thing to do. But I would do my best that he's fluent in German. I want him to be fluent German. I want him to be fluent in French. And I want him to be fluent in English. And if he wants another language like Japanese or something else or Chinese, I would be glad. I think it's great to be a multi-glot, to be able to speak a lot of languages. But I would do my best to transmit it to him. My friend Marian, she's Portuguese. Her kid doesn't even know how to say one single word in Portuguese. I said, it's very sad that your grandchild doesn't speak Portuguese, and I don't even think that her child speaks Portuguese, because she didn't even teach it to her own child, her language. And that's very sad. That's a huge loss of culture. But again, I'm a racist and my channel has to get banned, because I talk of my friend who is Portuguese and didn't transmit her Portuguese culture to her son. That makes me a racist. And my channel must be banned. And I talk about my struggle in conserving my German roots. That's the thing you could never talk about on YouTube. I tried my best to talk about it in a way without getting banned, and we'll see what happens. The loss is not only external, it is deeply personal. It's a part of my heritage, of my culture that is disappearing under my own eyes since I lose the fluency to talk German. And that's a sad thing. Now, the good news is that my capability of understanding is still close to 100%. But my ability to speak language has dropped a lot, since I haven't said one single word in German over decades. I want to talk about one of the last points, and it's a difficult point to talk about. Migrants keep their traditions. Newcomers almost never adopt the local cultures or language. They have no desire to become French, German, or Italian intellectuals. Maybe because it's a legal language and you cannot talk your dialect, you will know how to say a couple of words. That might happen. But that doesn't make you a French, German, or Italian intellectual. No more than a Portuguese intellectual. I'm not just interested in somebody being able to say hello and goodbye and understanding when I tell them, get me a coffee. I'm interested in much more than that. Life doesn't go down only to the most basic stuff. I know that the most basic stuff is the only thing that interests you because it's easy and you don't have to think about it. You don't need any philosophy. You don't need any critical thinking. You don't need any analysis. So you just go by as easy. Humans always choose the easiest path. Why are they obese? Because they choose the easiest path. It is much easier to do no effort than to go for a run every day. For that, you will need some willpower. Even if you use an exoskeleton, you will need some willpower. The exoskeleton does very little for you. Now, it makes my life much more pleasant. For me, it's much more pleasant to go for a run with an exoskeleton, but it still needs a huge amount of willpower. And if you don't have that, then the exoskeleton in itself would do nothing for you. I'm talking about an intellectual elite. That's what interests me. Why do I talk about the Mises Institute? Because it's the best thing. After him, there's nothing from an economical standpoint that you can talk about. It is Mises and then there's nothing. We have produced nothing. And as I told you, Mises has its shortcomings. Mises isn't perfect. Like an animal that stays true to its nature, they remain anchored in their culture. I'm saying about people that they remain anchored in their culture. It's always easier to remain in your culture. An animal will remain true to his nature. And they think that their nature is what they were brought up with. It's like if we talk about what is a Muslim, what is a Christian, what is a Jew, your definition of that has nothing to do with my definition. My definition is that you adhere to an ideology, that you adhere to a certain number of rules, and that you practice this certain number of rules. There are 613 in the Old Testament, there are 1050 in the New, and there are also a lot of rules in Islam, and so on. You adhere to a certain way of thinking and a certain way of living. That is what makes you that, according to me. Now, that's me. Everybody else thinks very different about that. They think if your mother is a Muslim, you are a Muslim. If your mother is Jewish, you are Jewish. If your mother is Christian, you are Christian. I do not agree that. Because for me, there has to be a choice. You have to actively choose one thing over another. Because I recognize your sovereignty. I recognize your way of living. And I respect your way of living. Okay? You don't respect mine. Since you think I'm a racist because my mother is German and I talked a little about immigration today. Because of that, you think I'm a racist and I have to be banned. And it must be made sure everything possible in humanity that I can never again talk to you. If possible, I have to be put in a cage. That's what you think. And for you, that is normal because that's what you learn. That's what you have been exposed to your entire life. Tolerance against other people, that's something that never existed for you. I told you, go with me to China. Let's go to Shenzhen and see communismus. I hate communismus. I hate every form of statism. Fascism, communism, democracy, everything that the state has ever produced, I despise. Everything the state has ever produced. Hate is not the right word. You must remember, I'm talking English. And sometimes I don't use the most perfect word to express myself. But I despise everything statism has ever produced. Even Marcus Aurelius, who I admire as a philosopher, I do not respect him as an emperor. Now, I think he's much better than the rest, much better. And if you really want to do democracy, and if you really want to choose somebody, you have to choose him. But I still don't agree with it, because under his reign, there was never-ending wars. He condemned some people to death. He put others in prison during their entire lives. I cannot endorse any of that as a philosopher who pleads for peace, freedom, and an anarchist who wishes to see a voluntary society that functions without any violence or coercion. I cannot endorse any of that. And still, I'm the racist. And I have to get banned. Just because my way of thinking, my critical thinking, my analysis of the world, my vision of the world is different than yours. I plead for tolerance. I would never ban anybody for talking about his culture and his origins. Never. It doesn't matter. And I don't believe in any form of guilt. Nobody should feel guilty to see the light of day. There's something really wrong with us when we hate humanity to the extent that people should feel ashamed to see the light of day, that people hate humanity that much that they want them to disappear. In my case, because I have a German mother, but in other cases, just to be human. It is enough to be hated just because you are human. For a lot of people, that is enough. They think it's very bad for the planet. They think that humans are the worst thing that has ever seen the light of day. And it's very hard to explain them that things don't have to be like this and that they don't have to hate humanity. Is it perfect? It's not perfect. Look at me. I'm criticizing it all day long. One of my neighbors, his wife is Ukrainian, and he just went to Ukraine. I asked him how it was with the war. And he said there are a lot of people who are injured, there are a lot of people who lost their legs, their arms, and so on. And an immense amount of people died on the battlefield. And here's the difference between me, the anarchist, and him, the statist. I would never endorse in any way or form Putin, Kim Jong-un, or Zelensky in any way or form. I'm against all the stuff they have ever done and whatever they ever will do. Because of the massacres that are never ending. Because of the meaningless wars that have no reason to be in the first place. Because there's no hate. An Ukrainian doesn't hate a Russian. And a Russian, I guarantee you, doesn't hate an Ukrainian. It is just that they all believe in authority. And when the state tells them that they have to do something, kill somebody, then they go and kill somebody. Which I would never do. And then people tell me, then you get executed. Whatever happens, happens. But I would never kill an innocent person, somebody who has not done me anything and doesn't want to harm me. I told you, I believe in the non-aggression principle. Never initiate violence, only defend. That's the difference between me. I see it as evil. He sees it as something that must happen. Because without the state, well, then he wouldn't have his life and his luxuries, according to him, and his pleasures and his enjoyments. He's a teacher in the university I went to. And he actually teaches German in that university. And I told him it would be nice if he speaks German, but he won't speak German to me. But I told him, he believes that it's necessary. Because just as Mises, he believes that if there's no state, then humanity could not exist. But that's the difference between me and him. I think that humanity has nothing to do, or technological progress, or your comfort, or your wealth, has nothing to do with the state. I think it destroys all that. It destroys your security. It makes never-ending wars. And with the taxes and the never-ending deflation, it destroys your financial wealth and your ability to survive and get out of life the things you want. I believe that the middle class has been destroyed as I speak and keeps on being destroyed. Because I believe that they want you to be dependent on the state to the highest degree possible. And I can show you stats to prove that. All the statistics go in that direction, not the opposite. I think you stay true to your nature. My nature is being stoic. And as long as I do the right thing, I will stay true to my nature. Now, they don't want to be stoic. They want to be what they are. Whatever they are, they want to be it. And they want to stay true to their nature. It is very hard to actually change. Even for me, if I would have to go to another way of thinking, like anything, Christianity, Islam, the Epicureans, it would be very hard because I would always know that for me it makes no sense. And I would always want to come back to something that I have looked for and that makes sense to me and that I want to endorse and live by. And it's the same for them. The only difference is that their cultural heritage has nothing to do with mine and they will stay true to their nature. And that's not a bad thing. It's just a number game, as I told you. And assimilation will happen, but not in the direction you talk about. It's the opposite. If it wasn't a number game, it wouldn't happen. And now you hate me for that and you call me an racist because I call about math. But that's nothing new. People think that math is racist nowadays. You cannot say the truth. Go to North Korea and tell them that Kim Jong-un is wrong. That 1 + 1 doesn't equal 1. He will condemn you to death. And just as he will condemn you to death because of his arithmetic. His arithmetic says that 1 drop of water and a next drop of water only makes 1 drop of water and not 2. 1 + 1 = 1. It's a joke he plays. But since he's a God who does miracles, it's the law. And you have to comply with that, which actually would be funny. You have to pay more because 1 plus 1 will always be just 1. Maybe you have to go direct from 1 to 3, whatever. It's just nonsense. But there are people who think that math is racist. And what I talk about is psychological facts. If you put a kid into a group of people and they all talk French, that kid will learn to talk French. Now, if you put him into a group of people who talks Spanish or Arabic, they will all talk Spanish or Arabic. It's a number game. Even if at the beginning he talked a different language. And that's why it's hard for me to preserve my roots, my German roots, because I'm put in a group of people who doesn't talk German. And I don't have one single friend who talks German. But everybody stays true to his nature until he wants to change his nature. And people do not want to change their nature. Now, I wanted to change my nature. Why did I want to become Stoic? Because I was suffering a lot. Because all the things you teach on TV, in school, or anywhere else were dead ends for me. They were morally dishonest. And I cannot believe in lies. If I start believing in lies, I start suffering. I know that there's something wrong with me. And people will tell me, but to believe in reality is much harder. It's not hard. Once you accept it and you understand it and you're philosophic, you will see that it's actually comforting, that it will do you a lot of good. But people, unless they do an immense effort, just as I've done by becoming Stoic, they will always stay true to the nature. And the easiest thing is just to be as you are, without ever questioning anything. Just be as you are. And people think that's love. People think that's love, accepting people as they are. Up to a certain end, you can do that, but it's not love. It is just tolerance. If you accept people for what they are, it is just tolerance. You won't be naive, but it's not love. You can only love somebody or accept him for his moral values, for his integrity, for his sense of justice, for the good he does instead of doing the bad. They are geniuses. Even the guy everybody hates, Epstein, he was a kind of genius. His fortune was colossal, was huge at his death. But he was a genius who turned to evil, and most people do. People will always stay true to the nature unless they want to change their nature, unless they want to become something else. And that requires a lot of effort. It's like if you start playing poker. What's easiest to be a losing player? What's easiest to do only for what you think is fun? But you will lose your huge fortune. You will lose your bankroll over and over. Now, if you want to become a profitable player, then you have to do a lot of work on yourself. You have to study a lot and you have to improve a lot. But your nature at the beginning is to be a losing player. You have to want to become a better player. You have to want to improve. Like an animal, they stay true to the nature. They remain anchored in their culture, language, and places of worship, and seek to reproduce them around themselves. Not just are they anchored in their culture, everybody is. He also wants to reproduce his culture, and he wants to be around it with the same culture, with the same like-minded persons. He wants to reproduce his culture around him. And I would also like a lot if I could find a wise person and talk to him and become more Stoic by following his example. But I know that a part of a couple of Stoic princes from antiquity, I will never see that. And I accept that fact. It's just a fact of life. It is a human constant. We seek those who share our reference and beliefs. And that's why it's hard for everybody to assimilate to somebody else. And above all, it's the number games, as I told you. But it's hard because you would have to change yourself, and nobody wants to change himself. Here's what everybody wants. They want you to tell them that they are perfect, even if they are not, and that you love them, even if there's no reason for loving them. That's what everybody wants. People don't want to change themselves. People don't want to improve. People don't want to get better and become deserving of love. They're not interested in that. Nobody is. They think that love is blind, which up to a certain extent sometimes could be the case, but in reality it is not. If it is blind, it is a feeling you get, but that feeling extinguishes very fast. If you want to maintain it, it has to find its root in reason. Only if you can agree to that love, only if you find it respectable and you find it optimal, you can only love somebody for his moral principles for over a long period. The rest isn't love. It's a passing feeling of excitement that vanishes really fast. English dominates professional life. Work in markets, poker, and serious discussion is conducted almost entirely in English. Other languages become secondary. That's also the thing. Why it is so hard to preserve my German roots is because everything serious is made in English. I even tried to explain that to the little kids we met before in French. Because one of the first questions he gave me, it's a very smart question. Why do you speak English instead of speaking German? And I try to tell him that nobody speaks French nowadays, unfortunately. And if I want that one day somebody listens to me, well, French is a bad idea to produce in French because they're very little people and they're all dying out. So why would you produce for somebody where the population shrinks every year from 10 million to 5 millions to 2 millions, and then you end up very soon at zero? Why would you produce for them? They would not listen to you. You find them, we call it an EMS, in a house for the all, for the dying. That's where you find them. You don't find them on YouTube. They won't listen to anything you say on YouTube. Anything serious is conducted in English nowadays. Other languages become secondary. The large US population produces more thinkers. People wouldn't agree with that, but I'll tell you why the large population produces more thinkers. Even if the proportion of interesting individuals is small, the size mechanically produces more thinkers than smaller countries. There would be more French intellectuals, German intellectuals, if the population would be as big as the one of the United States, 320 millions. But it's very low. When it's very low, if the amount of intellectuals are the same, you will produce less. But even in the US, with its 320 millions, but the source is also shrinking with the same migration dynamics. New thinkers often do not belong to American cultures, but to their own traditions, Islam, Indians, etc., whatever you come up with. But it isn't the US. And the US wasn't the most interesting culture. I don't think that the English language is the most beautiful language. Even Shakespeare sounds better to me in French. I think it's much more beautiful translated in French than in English. Now, it's not bad in English, but just the French language is extremely beautiful because it has a Latin roots, and it's very beautiful to listen to and to read. Now, it's very hard to write actually in French. It's much harder to write in French than to write in English. English is much more easier from a grammatical standpoint. But the difficulty makes it also more beautiful. Search for an active, valuable German channel. I'm searching for an active, valuable German channel. Now, the best I found was the Mises Institute, and it has its shortcomings. But that was the best I could find. Now, I'm looking for a channel which isn't dead, because the Mises Institute is dead. The last thing was 6 years ago, if not more. It is dead. And it is still statism. It will be very hard to me to listen to the entire content, because it's just statism, and it's limited, as I talked about in depth in this video. I would be interested in finding a continuous source of stimulating German content that I can listen to. If you are a German speaker and you know of a non-mediocre channel, then write to me to recommend it. It would help me preserve my German roots by allowing me to regularly hear German content. I'm interested now that I'm older and that I can think about such things. I'm interested in preserving my German roots. And if you know of a channel that could interest me, please tell me, because I would like to hear once a week or a couple of times a week somebody talk German, just so that my vocabulary gets fluent again, and it will be more easier for me in the future to talk about it. So this was one of the most difficult, not just subjects, but it was also one of the most difficult days to talk about it, because we are facing a heat wave. People cannot stand it anymore. It is 32 degrees even at night in my apartment. I'm very unlucky because my apartment is hot the entire year, but other people's it's hard for them too. They went all out. And while I was walking to the park, there was music and the crowd was huge. And it was very difficult for me to do this intervention. And the sun dropped 1 hour ago and I had to put on the light. It was as difficult as possible. Even the wind got on my nerves. There's no wind now. But the first time I started, there was heavy windfalls. So I had to go back and get the anti-wind shield for my microphone. A lot of things went wrong. It was one of the most time-consuming and hard videos to make. But I still think I managed it. Now I have to edit it, and I have to ask with every sentence I said if I can post that on YouTube, or if because I talk about the subject we discuss my German roots, I will get banned. I will try to do it in the best way possible, trying to be honest to my thinking and my Weltanschauung, my vision of the world and my philosophy without getting banned. And maybe I managed to make a miracle and can talk about such a difficult subject without getting banned. And for all of those who think that I'm a racist and that everything possible must be made that I end up in a cage and never be able to talk to you again, well, that's humanity. I don't even hate those people. I really don't. There's nobody I hate. There's no culture. There's no race. You can think whatever you want. The only difference is that I will never adhere to your way of thinking. That I will never respect your authority or any other authority on earth. That I will never comply to your way of thinking. I have something that's called a consciousness. And I want to live according to my consciousness, my moral principles, and my philosophy. And I know something about philosophy. I've written 4 books. Only one is edited. The other have all to be edited. But it's a huge amount of work. I hope I'll find the time to do it. I hope technology improves and it gets easier to do all that. But it's a huge amount of work. I know something about philosophy and morality. All the people who talk to me know nothing, zero about morality. The judge who puts me in a cage because I talk about my German roots has no idea about justice, philosophy. The only thing he wants to know is what his slave master, Kim Jong-un, tells him to do. That's the only thing he's interested in. It was by far one of the most difficult subjects I can talk about because everybody will call me a racist just because of talk about my German roots and because of the environment, the heat wave we are facing and the immense amount of people that were in the streets. I did the best I could under the given conditions and I tried to talk about this extremely hard subject and I'll see how far people push it. I see if I get my first strike because of that, and I see if my channel disappears. I tried my best to talk about it, and if you don't agree with my philosophy or my way of thinking, that's life. I do not agree with any philosophy or way of thinking, apart Stoicism. And if you think that Stoicism is racist, well, there's nothing I can do or say to you. Everything for you is racist. Me having a German mother is racist. Mathematics is racist. Classical music, Mozart, Beethoven is racist. There's nothing that is not racist. The only thing you like is you and your heritage and your culture and your Weltanschauung, your philosophy and your morality. That's the only thing you like. And you have no tolerance for anybody who thinks differently than you. I did my best with the conditions. I hope you appreciate the effort. I hope you get something out of this long intervention. If there's somebody who still thinks that I'm deserving of a like and who wants to subscribe, well, then that's awesome and a very rare thing in this world. I would appreciate that. Especially if they do it for honest reasons. If they do it because they found something in my books or in my intervention or in the videos that I produce that they find interesting. Especially then I would appreciate it. If it's not just to get me banned. Thanks for listening. Take care. And I see you soon. I hope that the next time the condition will be better and I won't have to talk about such a difficult subject and endure the huge risk that comes with it. I wish you the best. Take care and bye-bye.